Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett, are you moving?
Yeah.
You're moving that the bill now be read a second time?
Yeah, I move that the 39th Amendment of the Constitution Neutrality Bill 2022 be read a second time. So People Before Profit have put forward this bill seeking to to have a referendum to seek to insert neutrality into the Irish Constitution. Many people believe that military neutrality, Ireland's neutrality, is protected in the Constitution because there's a long understanding and overwhelming support for the idea that Ireland should be neutral, but in fact it is not. That neutrality is not protected in the Constitution and in our view is seriously under attack at the moment. That successive governments have sought to undermine that neutrality, most egregiously with the decisions of previous governments to allow millions of US troops go through Shannon Airport to prosecute bloody and unjustifiable wars in Afghanistan and then Iraq. Most egregiously, a war based on a pack of lies about weapons of mass destruction that led to the death of 1 million people, directly and indirectly, and essentially destroyed Iraqi society, damage from which it will probably not recover for decades, if ever. And Ireland facilitated that, even though it's supposed to be a neutral country. We have facilitated the outrageous practice, so-called rendition, better termed kidnapping and torture by the US, where they send Gulf Stream jets around the world, kidnap people they consider to be threats to American security with no trial, no due process, and then take them to black sites around the world and torture them, often in regimes that are despotic, brutal regimes in and of themselves who've allowed the US to carry on this practice. And then, of course, most recently, the government have sought to exploit the Ukrainian crisis, the terrible crisis in Ukraine, and what is undoubtedly a bloody imperialist and murderous war that has been initiated by Vladimir Putin. But the Irish government and indeed wider European political establishment are seeking to exploit that terrible crisis in order to justify moving towards greater EU militarisation, the establishment of a European army and closer alignment with NATO. Micheál Martin said recently, quote, "Neutrality is a policy issue that can change at any time." Leo Varadkar, "I think we'll need to think about deeper involvement in European defence." Simon Coveney suggested that we needed to spend more resources on defence as well as for cooperation with other EU countries and partnerships with NATO in some areas. That's what you were reported as saying in the United States at a meeting at a meeting you attended in the United States. You can respond during the debate to that suggestion, and of course you've suggested that we may get involved in this expanded rapid reaction force of 5,000 troops, which is essentially the embryo of a European army. Now, I want to say that Ireland's neutrality and the struggle for an independent Irish Republic are one and the same thing. They always have been, and that to move away from Ireland's neutrality is not just some sort of interesting tactical or strategic choice, it is in fact a betrayal of the essential struggle to establish an independent republic. Going right back to Wolfe Tone, who first advocated both Irish independence and Irish neutrality, and then to James Connolly and those who led people out in 1916, and the entire Irish Revolution. As soon as World War I broke out, James Connolly established the Irish Neutrality League to argue that Ireland should be in no way a participant or supporter of either of the warring sides in the First World War. He wrote at the time something that echoes pretty strongly today, I have to say. He said, should the working class of Europe, rather than slaughter each other for the benefit of kings and financiers, proceed to erect barricades all over Europe to break up bridges and to destroy the transport service, that war might be abolished. We should be perfectly justified in following such a glorious example and contributing our aid to the final dethronement of the vulture classes that rule and rob the world. Brilliant, and so correct. They had vulture funds then robbing the world, just as we have now. And Connolly was clear as soon as that war broke out, when people in Irish politics and the Home Rule Party argued that Irish people could, and they did, went out and got slaughtered in that war, Connolly said no. We oppose both sides in this war, and in fact, it was the outbreak of the First World War, which eventually led to the slaughter of 14 million people, that prompted Connolly to say we had to have a rebellion in Ireland, not just for Irish independence, but to strike a blow against empires and against the slaughter of the First World War. And indeed, the Irish Revolution very significantly accelerated by the conscription crisis of 1918. And indeed, the end of that war, the Irish Revolution, was part of a series of revolutions across Europe, in Russia, in Germany, in France, and so on, against that war. A war that was a slaughter that was ended by the revolt of working people against all the warmongers of Europe. We believe we have to uphold that tradition, which is now under serious threat. Neutrality does not mean indifference. Neutrality means standing against warmongers, standing against empires, standing with the oppressed. If we throw that away, we throw away what is, in fact, the identity of the Irish Republic, the struggle for the Irish Republic, and we would do so at our peril. So we should not do that, and I hope that the House will support our bill.